what's up? I'm Joel Madden, and this is Artist Friendly. On this episode, I'll be talking to singer and songwriter and frontman of Jacob's Castle and the new frontman of Sublime, Jakob Nowell. Let's go.
That's my kind. I don't want no bad times. I don't want to have bad.
Do you play Fortnite?
I've never played it. I'm a huge gamer and stuff. I'm very aware of I guess the culture behind it, but no, never played myself.
I play a little Fortnite. I don't play a lot of Fortnite. I started playing with my son because he got really into it during the pandemic. He still plays a little. He doesn't play a lot, but I probably play more than he does now.
Right.
And I play with one of my friends uses a Dragon Ball Z skin.
They have so much stuff in there. It's like it's so huge, you know? I think Sublime actually just got synced for some songs on Fortnite.
Great.
Isn't that crazy? I'm like, what kind of world is this where my pop songs are getting? It just blew my mind, man.
That's a good question. It's this world.
Yeah.
It's the modern world we live in where like
for real.
There's this like I found lately in the last year or two, there's been a real shift in music discovery and like what the modern, like I would say like the modern music fan isn't just young people, but they tend to be the ones who dictate the culture.
Oh, totally. Youth culture, you know?
Yeah. And what you could say is like this like neoclassic rock music, right? Because it's not like when we think of
classic rock.
How old are you?
28.
Okay, 28. I'm 45. We're somewhere like closer to each other than, well, you're probably like closer to my son's generation, so you could probably understand them more. But you sit in the middle of the analog.
Oh, totally.
And the digital.
Yeah. I was still in the era where like growing up in high school, no one had smartphones yet.
Right.
So there was still sort of this idea that, I don't know, you know, classic rock was a specific thing.
It's like Led Zeppelin.
67. Yeah. You think Led Zeppelin, you think Jimi Hendrix, you think that kind of stuff. Like, but now, when you say neoclassical, it's so true. Like kids will think stuff from the 90s, you know what I mean? Like
100% 90s.
It's like Oasis is classic rock to them.
Oasis, Alice in Chains, Sublime.
Totally. Yeah, totally.
Even our band, we're on the
100%.
like edge of that. You know, even though we came out in the late 90s, early 2000s, that's when we really started to like get into the world. Yeah. It's still on the tail end of that music because we made our records analog in the early days anyways, our first few records. So like there's this like wave of discovery, and it's not even like like some people say it's like a revival. I don't think it's a revival. I actually think it's people digging deeper because digital music, like track-based music, which I don't have a problem with. My kids like love that. But even them, I see them like starting to dig. It's like they're discovering these kind of like really rich sounding records.
Yeah, and it kind of stands a test of time, right? It's like almost like that Guitar Hero test. Like, will the kids still think this music is dope? And it's like, oh, it is. It's amazing, well-written stuff coming from that era. And me growing up with like, late 90s, early 2000s, that's like my jam. I actually made an analog record only one time, and I bring it up to give a shout out and a rest in peace to the late and great Steve Albini.
Oh yeah, rest in peace.
We did a record with him. It was the only to tape record I ever made, and it was like one of the best recordings. He was just legendary dude, you know? Like,
what's the name of that record?
It never saw the light of day. It's sitting in a vault in an old bandmate's like, you know, safe somewhere. And
are you ever gonna put it out?
I would love to now. Now I feel like I should hit him up and be like, dude, we gotta dust it, blow the dust off that thing, because we did like 10 songs in 3 days. We were just young 20s kids, just like drink a bunch of coffee into these 12-hour sessions, all to tape, no click tracks. And, you know, I don't think I'll ever do an album like that again. I mean, I hope maybe in the future, but he was just such a robotic, like on point, old school cat, you know, like he was just, this is the way you make records. Yeah. And bam.
Truly one of the great record makers of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Really special and gone too soon.
Yeah.
I was thinking about him this morning, obviously.
Right.
I was lucky this morning. I had like more time than usual. My kids are in like high school. It's busy, you know, in the morning, you're like going to school, drop off, all that stuff. Today was particularly quiet because one of the kids didn't have school and blah, blah, blah. So I had this like time and space to like
reflect a little bit.
And that obviously the news of his passing this morning was like, the first thing I saw
still doesn't fully hit me. It kind of blows my mind. Like, yeah, I'll never forget working with him was a trip. And we got in there and he was just so like, he comes in, he was wearing like a full like jumpsuit, like a mechanic suit and like a beanie. And he was like, hello there, my name is Steven. I'll be your engineer today. We're like, all right. And he no production stuff. He made that very clear from the get-go. He's like, I'm your engineer. Right. So what kind of record are we making, fellas? And we're like, well, this is what we want to do. And he's just like, I'll go set it up. And he, no assistance. He just set up his entire studio all himself over in Chicago, electrical audio. And I'll never forget too, we would do these long sessions. I never saw the guy eat once. Wow. He would just drink these giant piping hot coffees that his interns would make, you know, the interns from the local engineering university, whatever. Yeah. And he had this like coffee machine in his studio. And there was like a laminate thing that they printed out and all the bands would sign and say, it was like a whole thing. It's like electrical audio has these things called fluffy coffees where they would make like an espresso machine with really whipped up milk. Mm-hmm. So you'd create this giant fluffy drink and then he'd put a bunch of maple syrup in it. Oh, wow. And he just would drink like 4 of those a day and I never saw him eat food. So, yeah. So he was just working like a machine, man. Like
basically caffeine and sugar.
Yeah, exactly. And talking about how records sounded like back then. I mean, he was always like, people say tape sounds warmer. He's like, I don't know about that. He's like, to him, it was just the way you made a record. It just was part of that process. Like something came out of that. So it is awesome to get to have that experience for sure.
Yeah, it's cool to hear that. Mm-hmm. That's really cool.
Yeah, it was a trippy experience, man. And such a just professional.
But also to me feels so right. I can only imagine how interesting your life has been, right? And so I was really excited to talk to you because I've been kind of following you. Yeah. I'm a huge Sublime fan. I would say that's one of the bands that, like, you know, in my early musical development of understanding like songs, and all I really had as a teenager was the radio. Right. And certainly in the 90s, like alternative radio was it was such a thing.
Oh yeah. In Southern California of all places too, it was like definitely a movement. Right. So, you know?
I grew up in Maryland and I didn't get to travel as a kid. I didn't get to see anywhere outside of where I grew up, which was a small like country town. And I used to dream about California. It was always like my dream was to go to California. It just seemed like this place where everything was like magical and there was all these great bands and it was like a culture. Sublime was one of the bands that I would say early on, like it really formulated my understanding of songs. The mashing up of genres seemed like to be like there was a lot of rules in the music, seemed like, and so I can only imagine. So to me, one of the greatest bands of all time, right? I just think one of the greatest.
Appreciate that. Yeah,
bands of all time. So
blows my mind to think about it.
Yeah. So to grow up with your father's legacy, you only really got to know your father probably through his music and what your family told you, and so I can only imagine how difficult / just strange that is, right? But it's all you've ever known, right? So
totally, man. It's my life. It's like a screwy way to grow up, that's for sure. Like, I don't know. Sometimes people will see it, and like I could be out somewhere and someone comes up and has this long-winded story they want to tell me about Sublime or whatever, and it's like so flattering and cool, and then the friend I'm with is like, man, that's so crazy. I'm like, no. What's crazy is the show I just played. What happened right there with that person, that is my life. Like, that is just since I was a child. And I would say my mom did a good job of kind of like sheltering me from it, grew up in like a really crazy kind of Southern California insane household with a lot of partying and wild weirdness and not like the rock style partying or like the white trash version of that. Right. Like it just wasn't really like around like that. Like we had some of the, I guess, stuff on the walls. Aside from that, it was kind of always in the background, I dropped out of school when I was like 17 and just started working like the local bagel shop, and then moved to Long Beach, worked at the hardware store, and just the next 10 years tried to make it with my own band and stuff. And then finally found a little bit more success with a new project I started called Jacob's Castle, my solo project.
I like it.
We got an epitaph. It was really cool.
Yeah, the
Some doors
record's
were
good.
opening. Oh, thank you so much.
The
You checked it
single
out?
is great.
Oh man, that's really nice of you to say, man. That's like
It's
huge accolades,
really good.
man.
It's really good.
Far out, dude. Let's go.
It's got so for me, when I listen to the music, especially the latest single and the stuff you put out from the record, and you have a new record coming out, right? Enter the Castle, or is that already out?
Enter the Castle is the one that just came out. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
it just
correct.
came out. Okay,
Yeah.
so Catch Me is
Yes, that's like my favorite one.
that's the song for me that I
Yeah,
listen to
people
over,
respond, dude.
over and over again.
That is so huge, man. You know, it's funny because you said, you know, like you hearing my dad's music growing up. I grew up with y'all's music.
Oh, really?
I swear to, yeah, it was like that era was just like, I don't know, man, like early being on the internet and like MySpace and going out to like Hot Topic and places like that.
Dude.
That was like my culture and my shit and the stuff that inspired me to make this project. So it's really interesting how the whole cycle of music works. It's like we always ask ourselves, why do we do it? Why do we keep putting ourselves through this and making the stuff? And I think that's why, is because it just, the next generation takes it and you never know who it's going to go into effect.
Yeah, so that is actually what I was thinking about, and I couldn't articulate it, so it might take me a minute. But from birth to now, you've been living in the world in your real life, right? The real person, not the idea of Jacob. Right. So I started, when you first put out music, I saw something and I was like, oh, that's cool, right?
Yeah.
I have a theory that greatness comes from greatness.
Right.
So I just have a feeling. I just believe it, like I believe that apples come from apple trees. Right. So I have this like theory about you that when you discover your own greatness, likely in music, right? The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, as they say, right? So in your own, but then you have to live your own real life.
Right.
But in your real life is this, like you're saying, this song or story playing in the background. It's like a movie that's always on a screen behind you.
Constantly.
And it's your father's legacy.
Yep. Yeah.
That
inescapable.
So the idea of that to all of us is like, oh, wow, cool, right? And then there's the reality of that for someone who's finding out who they really are in the world as a real person that has to build a life and go out into the world every day, make a living, build a life, do all the real things that we have to do that we don't think about when we're scrolling and just looking at snapshots of people and formulating our opinion of who they probably are.
Yeah.
Oh, that must be cool. Well, then, so in my age now at 45, I would pause before I would judge something at face value or by the story, by the headline.
Right.
Because also we live in a media-driven world where everything's a headline.
Oh yeah.
So they're gonna throw around actually heavy stuff.
Oh yeah,
in
personal stuff.
Personal stuff.
Yeah. Fucking
and you
man.
just have to have the self-esteem, which also is something we have to get on our own,
dude,
and the integrity and the class to be able to smile and move through people minimizing these big ideas, right? Like our relationship with our dad or our non-relationship with our dad. Whatever the relationship is, we have a relationship with the idea of our fathers.
Oh yeah, it's a big human thing for sure.
Every human in the world has some idea of the father as like an archetype in our life, whether we had a relationship with him or not. I had a very complicated relationship with my dad.
Here we go.
Left when I was young. It's been a big piece of my life trying to figure that out, trying to make sense of that. And on the other side of it, my dad's passed away, but I got to make amends and have that with my father in the best way that I could.
Yeah.
Wasn't perfect. It's complicated. But now people would write about that and just throw it out there as a headline of a story.
Yeah, like so-and-so did this.
So-and-so's father, he reunites, he blah, blah, blah. Like that's how they would put it. That's why I never shared it.
Minimizing this incredibly connective moment just to a headline is just
to a headline that people will click through and scroll through for 5 minutes and gather what they want from it. But that's the reality of entertainment. That's the reality of art when it's commercialized and whatever. And that's a part of making a living as an artist. But it makes me really happy to see you on the other side of youth.
Right.
And you know, I know you're sober. You've talked about that.
Yeah.
Which is a huge deal.
Oh yeah, big part of my life for sure.
A lot of people don't get that.
And a big part of the story too, in a lot of ways, you know, like if you look at all these things, all these personal moments in your life, it's sort of like a story, and we have to, because we're storytellers. Like anything that happened to me is only so good as it's worth in drama. You know what I mean? Like, if it's not like a good dramatic thing, then how can I use that?
Anyways.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just this funny thing. But yeah, my dad obviously passed away from a heroin overdose. And I think during that era, there was so much like opiate, like media happening, you know, Train Spotting and all this stuff. Like, and now we're at this.
Yeah, that was a moment.
Yeah, you know, and then people are talking about the 27 Club all the time. And now with these younger generation of artists, it's more like it's the 17 Club.
Yeah.
Fentanyl kills people a lot quicker, it seems like. So you see the culture starting to change where, you know, no one really calls you square if you don't want to do a bump of fentanyl at a party. It's not like you might have been square for not wanting to do the blow, but fentanyl, it's like, no, that killed my cousin or that killed my friend's cousin. You know, everybody knows somebody. And so I think me being sober is a big part of like, okay, I'm never going to escape the comparison. I'm never going to escape who I am. My name is Jakob Nowell. I can't change my name and cut my hair and go work on a farm somewhere. I could do all that stuff, and sometimes that's people's goal in life, but part of me knows that I'm an entertainer and it is what I want to do, and it fixes or completes something inside of me. So if I'm going to step into the light and do that, I have to embrace who I am in some way. And